I'm really careful with using the words understanding what AI is. Sorry, I would much rather say that they are finding out what different types of AI can do for them, rather than trying to find one umbrella definition, because that umbrella definition is so abstract that it's hard to really apply to everyday problems, I would say.
And it's more leaders in the business who are interested in this kind of questions.
And this ties in really well to one of our key hobby horses here that we usually bring out, and that is that we need to put the tools in the hands of the people who are actually dealing with the everyday problems. So we need to raise the skill level of, for example, doctors or teachers or what have you, in order for them to understand which problems are now solvable that weren't a couple of years ago.
It brings to mind, a situation back in the day when I worked in Peltorian, and we were going to also actually help a health company. And, we were sitting down there and thinking, okay, this is the best use case to get started with. This is what AI would actually make the most value for. And we started to build some prototype for it, some proof of concept. And I said, it's okay. And then we simply, they simply started to think by themselves. And they came back to us a couple of weeks later saying, you know what, we'd rather use AI for this instead. And you went, that's not going to really work. And then we tried it out, and that was so much better.
Yeah.
Because it's creative value.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's for some, and they understand, what need they have. And of course, we thought, as technical people, that we can think, what creates most value for them. But, if they truly understand what the tool is and the problems they have, and they can themselves, understand what they can use it for, that's so much more valuable.
Definitely, fully agree. It sounds like you reached the point where I'm at today, a couple of years ago.
I think it's also another benefit with it. It is if someone is pushing like a solution onto someone, that's really hard to make it work. But if someone actually takes the initiative to drive it themselves, you don't have to do the whole anchoring work, so to speak.
No.
So,
right. And in that sense, it's more mature today than or like a year ago.
And could we in some ways picture this conversation? How does it go now? So it starts a little bit like how we think we need an AI strategy. What is AI? What do you mean with AI? Moving into discussing use cases or problems they are thinking about. So how does that cycle go now, you think? If you contrast that to just how it was before?
In the ideal world, I would say that cycle is going to start accelerating now when people first when the core business people or the professions, the non-tech people, when they have their skill level raised, or when they raise their skill levels, and you suddenly can enter into a constructive dialogue with the people from the tech side of things, and when these people start actually being in the same room for long periods of time, and just getting creative and tying those two skill sets together and getting them to overlap as much as possible and as soon as possible. I think that is the big key to empowering and getting some real mileage out of new technology.
And how far in this conversation today would you say that they are understanding that this is technology that they might be able to adopt within the current organization and steering and stuff like that? And how much do they fully embrace that this might also, data and AI changes workflows?
You mean in public sector?
Yeah, so in this conversation, are they thinking, we love to talk about the digitize versus digital transformation, right? So so they have an idea that something's going to be more automated, but it's within the frame of how they do things today, or do they think? Do they have the reinvention idea already now, or how do you see that?
I would say it depends on who the person who's telling the question is. Yeah. I've been looking for these Vinnova projects and seen those applications, and if you have done your first homework with asking yourself what kind of value do you want to create, and what kind of data do I have, and what kind of solutions or problems do I want to to find a solution for. So I would say those organizations are more mature. But if you just want, like, we need an AI strategy because everybody else seems to have one.
Because that was of course the underlying question. When we see an observed shift that they have matured. Are they maturing to that we need an AI strategy, or are they maturing all the way to understand the implication, what they're asking for?
Well, I'm really hoping that they're maturing beyond we need an AI strategy. Could you please devise that for us? So I would say that people are moving past that, hopefully, or verifiably. I would say that people are doing that. I would also say that lost my train of thought.
Can't you frame it like, if I may? I mean, I think it's okay to do both. What I mean with that is, if you want to digitize or digitalize, I mean, it's actually not a bad idea to simply start to optimize the current business processes you have.
As a way also to learn what you can do to really see it. So
but then if you understand that you can really transform even more if you start to change the business processes as well, that's fine. But it's actually not necessarily bad to start to just, improve in the current processes.
Yeah, we have seen that example. Copilot are doing a quite big shift for servants in the public sector, because when they have their own experience on how to maintain like your Outlook in a certain way together with Copilot, you get this revelation that AI could really change the way I use my time. And then when you come to how can you use AI in other processes, then you have been, more into that kind of thought. What can this be shifting? Yeah.
And I think a key point here is the world revelation, because I think that a lot of the people I meet in my line of business now is they have this intellectual idea of that this will be transformational. When you actually get hands-on experience, you don't only get it the intellectual version of it. You actually can feel it in your guts, and I think that is actually a revelationary or transformational.
Yeah.
They are
I sometimes wish that people, when they write an AI strategy, don't exaggerate it too much. It's okay to start slow, I think. It doesn't have to start with transforming the whole business directly. I mean, that's actually potentially a bad idea even. So, sometimes I see these kind of AI strategies, and they are aiming too high, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think this will be an interesting discussion. But let us start first. Welcome you both here, Louise Callenberg and Peter Daniel, to the AI After Work podcast. And actually, it's more or less exactly 4 years since we started now. And Louise was our first guest then.
Yes, I know. Homecoming.
4 years, wow.
4 years and 2 days, I think.
Who's counting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, someone is.
4 years and 2 days, but who's counting?
That was great.
It was.
Yes,
right?
I remember that call, and I just loved the idea. I still do.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have evolved, Henrik. We're doing more or less the same, but some improvements, I think, and still having fun, right?
I don't know. I don't want to improve on having fun. I'm just going to keep it there.
But actually, we talked about some ethical questions then, and we talked about is there any God in tech and data, and that's my background as a theological person who is really into that kind of value discussion. That has
God in data.
Yes, God and data. And my definition, because we talked about definition of AI before, it's always starts in that sense. You have to define what you mean by something good. So if you mean that you can make life better for humans and citizens in Sweden, then I would say yes. But it's all about what you want to do with.
I add that to the list. I think
Yes,
that's
you do that.
But short introduction,
yes. Louise, perhaps if you would, how would you introduce yourself, very briefly?
Oh, I would introduce myself as a humanist that loves technology and loves a society that brings the best out of what we can do together. And I'm also an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I've perhaps always been, but I've been working as a civil servant for most of my career.
Because for 4 years ago, you were working at SKR, right?
Yes.
And you were basically heading up their digital transformation work,
Yes.
So really cool times. But now you have also a number of companies, the leadership art, right?
Yes, and we still help organization to lead the transformation.
Right.
So that's what we do. But we are totally focusing on skills, on human skills, because when we are talking about the digital transformation, we always get to that culture question and how can you make people in the business like this change, and how can you as a leader drive the transformation with courage, but also when everything bad happens, you still have to steer and have a clear vision. And how do you do that? And I think that's a part of our human skills that needs to be addressed.
So the leadership art basically is it like an educational edtech company that helps people perform actually the digital transformation that you want to do? Yeah, awesome.
And we have a different kind of organizations with us. But today we had Coop, the grocery store. And we have been to different municipalities as well. So it's
you also have a very interesting background, actually having a bachelor in theology, right?
Yes.
Which is, I think, very, very interesting as well. So coming back to the idea, is there God in data? I think
and I have a podcast called bättredelat with AI.
So bättredelat and better shared, I think, is an interesting concept. I actually add that as a list or a question very soon. But before we go into what bättredelat is and the report, which is the main theme for this podcast, perhaps we can just hear a bit more from Peter Daniel. How would you describe yourself?
I would describe myself as an engineer and as a change management and a change manager and advisor to mainly public entities nowadays. I've been doing this for 25 years, and slowly but steadily I've been evolving away from pure engineering and more into the human people side of things. So I think that Louise and I are now meeting each other in the middle here somewhere.
Exactly.
But you have an engineering background as well, then, or?
I do have an engineering degree. Then it's been mostly PowerPoint engineering since then, if I'm really honest. But there you go.
Yeah, awesome. And you're working as a partner at PA Consulting, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm one of 9 partners in Sweden for a company called PA Consulting, which is a multinational company with a headquarter in UK. So we're about 4,000 people, everything from engineers to UX designers to management consultant, leadership advisors, etc.
But you're focusing on public sector, is that correct? Or?
My main focus is public sector nowadays, yes.
Yeah, because I have an old background in Vattenfall, and I remember a friend who joined PA Consulting in the energy domain, so to speak. So I assume you have several different domains in PA Consulting as well as technical disciplines, so to speak, or different disciplines.
That's a good description. Yeah, we're servicing 5 different segments, and we have a number of different capabilities. So yeah, there's some sort of matrix at play here.
And which are these 5 domains?
We're doing
segments?
Public services, as we already mentioned, and energy, as you brought up.
Yeah.
Then we have financial services. We have consumer and manufacturing, and we have transport and logistics. And we are, I wouldn't say unique, but slightly different. One thing that sets us apart is that we focus quite heavily on the public sector. So about every 50% of every hour we spend at work is towards the public sector in some shape or form.
And used to orientate ourselves practically now when you talk about AI and AI strategy in public sector.
Yes.
How does that work? Segment focus and then discipline focus on different topics, or?
Yeah, we do obviously like everybody else. We have been investing quite heavily in building our competence in AI, and then that is basically everything from axe to limpa, from cradle to grave, from strategy formulation into making concrete action plans, into actually building proofs of concept and implementing solutions. So we try to cover the whole value chain there. And we do that in a very global way, which means that we have a global center of excellence for AI.
Cool. And before we move into the main report, which is interesting, can you just describe a bit what is Better Shared, bättredelat? And you're the founder of that, right?
We are actually together. We founded it together.
We're like an old couple nowadays,
yes,
aren't we?
we are. So we actually met through the frustration over the cloud discussion that was like a wet blanket over the discussion for some years ago. Perhaps like 4 years ago when we sat here, we had that kind of positive view on the digitalization in the welfare system, but then it came to the GDPR and also some kind of scarcity for using cloud services. And that actually was something that was kind of surprising because we are using quite a lot of cloud services in Sweden before and after. So the frustration in that was like we saw that leaders and politicians were getting scared of that digitalization and leading that change. And that in that time we wanted to give some perspectives and nuance, but we also said that we have to focus on this question not from the financial point of view, but what can be better in life and in like quality of living, and can data and data sharing and cloud services save lives? Then you have the moral question, and then you can talk to the politicians on how to take risks. Because what we saw was that, okay, there is some unclarity in how to interpret GDPR, or we have some hindrance in the law, but how to deploy and lead actually means that you have to have the knowledge, but also the vision. So, but if you don't know what to do with it, so it's very hard to say to a politician or decision makers, please be bold. They don't know what's at risk or at stake. So that's where we started to create those cases, human business cases. And we said that it has to be data-driven and have a lot of facts, and that's why we collaborate, because I have a clear vision of how to talk to politicians, and you from PA could do the math.
So we basically we both, I think, came to the same conclusion that it's the digitalization is just too boring to make policy out of if you just keep talking about the financial benefits of doing stuff.
Yeah, or the infrastructure.
So what we said was, well, we need to make this interesting for politicians. We need to talk about how many people die or fall seriously ill or what have you from us not using the technology we have available already.
Awesome. That's a really good way, I think.
And then we gathered leaders from municipalities and regions to discuss in roundtables the cases, and we took very, very many notes. And then we discussed on what are the positions that those leaders want us to take as a collective, as a society. And then we put out the first report. So our white papers are basically notes from discussions from practical leaders who wants a change.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the key factor for our success. It's not you and me who are great thinkers. We are, but it's not that that's in those reports. It's basically those leaders who are doing the bold steps in regions and municipalities.
I'll try to summarize if I get it. So in a nutshell, bättredelat is all about that there is frustration and friction in terms of we should be doing more or less or like this. So we collect the real people, the real leaders, and we facilitate the conversation where we end up articulating a position on something or different positions or like this. And then in this sense, creating a common ground and an aligned view that several can stand behind as a way to build momentum and build consensus and build mobilize.
Exactly.
That's a very good summary. And one of the really encouraging things we found was that, when we set up, it was basically me and Louise being a bit ticked off with the current state of events, right? And what was so encouraging was that after only a couple of weeks into this, we obviously used our networks to find people in the different areas of local and national governance, and you realized how many people actually shared this frustration that we had. So it went just building that went really quickly.
And when did you do the first meetup and report? Which one was the first?
The first one was on health, and I think it's 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2021. Yeah.
And if you give us a brief overview of those meetings, what types of reports or positions and discussions have you taken, ticked off so far?
Well, first of all, one of the things is that we try to feed in a number of very concrete use cases into these meetings. Mm-hmm. For example, we're saying that it is undisputable that online connected pacemakers or insulin pumps significantly improve quality of life for the people who use them compared to old school non-online offline tools. And there were some issues with where is the data stored? It's personal data, so it should be handled with respect and care. And where is that data stored, etc. And there was a lot of very very conservative interpretations on how you're allowed to use these technologies. So we basically fed in a use case saying that these many people are negatively affected by not getting access to modern tech. And then we basically asked the network, do you agree? Is this a relevant case? And if so, what can we do to alleviate this? And I think one of the biggest takeaways from the first paper was that the acknowledgement that this is actually complex issues, and as in almost everything within public governance, it's a matter of resolving conflicting goals, conflicting objectives. On one side, we need to preserve personal integrity, and on the other side, we also have a legal and moral obligation to provide the best possible care.
And to preserve life.
To preserve life, if you take it to the extreme, and it's actually very hands-on. I mean, people are dying unnecessarily from not getting access to modern care. So this is not new to public sector. I mean, doing these trade-offs, it's something we do every day. I mean, the National Road Administration, they know exactly how much money they are prepared to invest to save one life, one person from getting killed on the highway, right? Everybody in the public sector is making these judgments or trade-offs. Mm. But for some reason, when it came to digitalization, it turned into a very sort of dumbed down and black and white discussion. And I think that is actually one of the things I've really seen a change during the past few years, where people actually acknowledge that it is a tricky question, and you need to be able to work with different level of risk here.
And as a service person, you need to, or a civil servant, you need to work hard with creating change. If it's a problem with the law or the interpretations or how you have the exchange with other countries, you need to work on that. And there are some civil servants that has that role, and they need also to go to work and make a change, but they need also to know what kind of change are asked for. So this was also a way to point out those barriers that we have and start to collect momentum.
But I think this is very good in so many ways, and there's much research, Kahneman, etc., that highlights how we are illogically risk averse, right? So human nature, we are conditioned to take less risks. So I don't think we think about this until we get it facilitated or shaped in such a way so you understand the full risk spectrum. Exactly. And then all of a sudden you can have a completely different conversation. So people are not dumb, but they are illogical because they have only considered a small piece of the puzzle in one question.
So moving to the theme of today, so to speak, can you elaborate? What is the report that you recently published?
Well, that was our third report, and the report that we took forward was moving the needle in the technical development in the Nordic welfare system.
So to the Nordics,
yes,
as well.
Because we had a thought last year that this discussion that we are having in Sweden, and we see the needles moving, but it doesn't move that fast really. And if you look at the data that you need to use to make those big data technology, developing those kind of technologies, you really need to focus on how to collaborate cross borders. That's one of the things. But the other one was also we don't have enough competent people in Sweden, and they don't have it in Denmark either, and not in Norway. So we also need to have like a way to, one small country, two small country makes a bigger country.
Yeah,
too
like
that.
small to do it ourselves, but if we do collaborate, we could be good enough.
Yes, and that actually boils down to the amounts of data too. It turns out that our data pools in Sweden, when it comes to a number of different types of care, for example, are just too small to draw the right conclusions.
Yeah.
So by pooling our resources, we can make things so much more efficient and so much better.
And then you have the third point that we are interpreting the EU legislation differently.
Right.
So Finland are having one kind of strategy, Estonia is doing one thing, and Sweden and Denmark and Norway some other points.
I must ask, who is the most conservative?
Right now, I think Denmark is.
It used to be Sweden. Yeah. I would say that Denmark is giving us a run for the money right now, unfortunately. Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes. But it was very interesting to gather those 5 cases in this report. We took one case from one country, so there are 5, and then gathered leaders from those countries to discuss just the same method as we always use. And we actually thought that they would be disagreeing more, but the thing is that they find, as usual, strength in each other, and was really liking this kind of discussion, and also that we need to collaborate. It was so clear.
So you put together some kind of meeting workshop where leaders in welfare systems.
From researchers from with background as head of municipalities or regions, or acting head of municipalities and regions.
And overall now, how does it work? Is it a one-day think tank, 2 days, or how do you structure it?
It's a process. The first question is the cases. Yep. So you need to call up a lot of people, and that took a lot of time because you need to find it. In Sweden, we know people, but in Finland or Estonia, it's harder. So you need to use your network really
to sort out. Use the starting point with the cases you want to bring in. Yes. This is a one segment of the of. Okay, if I go the cycle now of one meeting. And
then you also need to choose which kind of cases that you want, because there are perhaps a lot of cases from cancer, but we can't have 5 from cancer. So we need to, find what kind of
case selection.
Case selection is one, and then the other one is who are we going to invite to our round tables, and the round table are like 2 or 3 meetings.
2 or 3 meetings over a period of weeks, months?
Couple of months.
Couple of months, yes. Because in between, we develop the cases, and we also start to write the positions. So the second round-up meeting are about the findings from the first. So you have that discussion. This is what we found that you are saying. Are you agreeing? And then we...
And you literally draw up a straw man and a disposition and a draft point of view, and then you iterate and align.
Yes. Because you need to keep in mind that a lot of the participants we have, they are actually parts of public entities, which means that they need to be careful on what they sign, because it's actually they're doing that from time to time as in an official capacity, which means that we need to do this very thoroughly and very iteratively to make sure that everybody is still on board with what we're saying together.
Cool. If you were to try to just try to summarize perhaps a bit the challenges that all the Nordic countries are facing. You mentioned a couple, I think, already. We're too small, both in terms of competence that we have, but also amount of data potentially. But how would you summarize, the main challenges for the Nordic welfare systems?
Something that I could put to that list is also fractured infrastructure.
Right.
Yeah.
So fragmented
yes,
infrastructure system. Yeah.
Totally fragmented, and also we don't share data. The obvious thing. So competence, financial issues. We are too small. We don't share data, and the fragmented infrastructure.
And then we have the two mega trends, obviously. We have an aging population with fewer and fewer working people needing to support more and more elderly people. And also you have since the increasing digitalization is moving at pace in the private sector, people are expecting the public sector and the welfare services to behave in similar ways as the digital services I'm using that are delivered from the private sector, which sort of might, if you're not careful, end up in a situation where people are frustrated with what the public sector delivers, and that in turn is going to hurt democracy, to be honest, to undermine our faith in our democratic system. So these, I would say, are the two sort of mega trends, to use a bit of an overused word.
That's interesting, because our work name for this was democracy at stake. So we were, because we were like drawing, putting the line out there, and we saw that if the welfare system doesn't use AI or technology to solve their problems because they don't have enough capacity in itself, so AI can help solving the problems. If we don't, we have a problem with the trust in society and democracy in the end. So.
When you did this kind of workshops, I guess AI, was AI really the main focus, or was it like more general kind of what are the digitalization challenges in general, or what was the focus?
We were slightly more specific than general digitalization. Yeah. We've been using the phrases data sharing and AI, and from time to time we just sort of used a blanket phrase with new technologies. But in reality, it's about finding ways to share data across organizational boundaries and then applying different types of AI-related tools to them. I would say that's a definition.
And how far are we coming in these conversations with what I am assuming leaders now to understand the why, the what, and the how? So why we need to do it, okay. What on an abstract level would we need to do, but also what is blocking us, or what are the fundamental capabilities? Sharing data is easy to say. To do it correctly, you need to start being a little bit concrete what you are talking about. So so in these conversations, what's the aim here? Is it more the position paper on the why, so how deep are the conversations going?
Well, I would say that these are leaders who know that why, and they have an idea on how as well, and what the fundamental needs. But they are quite few leaders who has this insight.
Yes, so I would say so, even in private sector.
Yes.
If you talk about leaders.
If we talk about the leaders. But you have to remember, these are the people who organize the organization. So if you have like entrepreneurs in your municipality or region who do those pilots or proof of concept with AI, or in stuprören, then you don't have the way to scale it up. So one of the things that we talked about or focusing on in this paper and in the discussion was how to scale. Because one thing is to be a leader who build an organization that can change so you can adopt AI, but eventually you need also to learn how to scale, even inside your own organization.
And if I understand it correctly, I think one term that we heard other people like Patrick Eckemo and others speak about is the prototype graveyard. And
yes.
There are so many people that I want to build a proof of concept to do X, Y, and Z, and it's really hard to come from that to something that actually is put in production and providing value. And
exactly.
If I understand it correctly, you're saying from the start you should have an idea about how to scale it. Otherwise, it's right.
Yes,
otherwise it's just entertainment.
Yes, and you need the top leaders to make an organization that allow you to scale.
Right.
Because the frustration that Patrick is talking about, the graveyard, is actually people who are really, they are so fired up with this AI use, and they have probably also really good ideas and pilot results. But when it comes to scale it up, they have a director who is like, not have that insight.
But
so then they say like, oh, well, that like IT should take part of that. We don't have more money, and the collaboration with that municipality. No, that's not in our strategy.
But this is a really important, but also quite deep topic to talk about scaling, because if we can discuss scaling now from doing a pilot. You know, we do a research project, we get some Vinnova money in, we get a couple of PhDs from RISE, and we do something super cool. And it's a point solution that is built on spaghetti for one project, and this is beautiful. You know,
not everyone is doing it that way.
No, but I
some use spaghetti, some other use.
What I'm trying to say is, you're building something and putting it in production. Like first, you have something which is on paper, but then you put it on production, but on a small scale. Like with people who are not actually part of the real organization. Then we can talk about scaling in terms of adoption within the larger organization, but still for one municipality. Then you come to the other end of scaling, and where maybe typically, in order to understand how you need to build things, you need to think about this like, well, you're going to have 200 or 300 of these. And how would you then go about data sharing? Because to do data sharing for one single case, I can do that in production with the IT department, but it's not going to be the same story. You know, so I think this scaling topic that you were alluding to is, I assume this was exactly what you are. This is a big one.
A friend of mine who is who's running a startup now, he came back from an investor meeting and was really fired up, and he said this was probably the best potential investor meeting I ever had, because she asked exactly the right questions. And one of the first questions she asked is this architecture scalable? You know, can you actually get this to grow sustainably over 3 or 4 years without having to refactor or rebuild it all from scratch again? And I think that if that's a fairly odd question to get asked, if you're trying to find seed money here somewhere in the private sector, it's probably even rarer question to be asked if you're in the public sector, especially since there are so few people with an overarching responsibility for ensuring that things are scalable across municipalities or across regions, etc. But I really do think, and that's one of the things we're putting forth in this paper, that in order to not just do cool stuff, but to actually affect significant change and realize significant benefits, you need to have that scalability issue addressed from day one, because as you're saying, you know, the graveyard is full of cool pilot projects.
Right. And also,
so many questions popping out of that. Can a municipality scale this on their own?
Henrik, we should try to keep it short as well. I think we will fail again, but still.
How's that working out for you?
Yeah, how's that working out for us? Not so good. It's too much fun. Too much fun. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to change the format. It's too much fun.
But then we need to scale, and we need to share data in different ways, as you say, and not only share data perhaps in an organization, but also across regions and even across countries. But then we have the ethical issue of that, and personal integrity, as you say. Is that still manageable, you would say, to still have a ethically sound solution to share data, or how do you solve the ethical issues with sharing data?
Well, there are some. I think there are some politicians that need to address that kind of question, and to have a discussion across the Nordic and the Baltic region on AI ethics, and not only on integrity, but also what kind of society do you want? You know, so there were of course some large ethical questions when we started to empower with electricity the society, and of course I'm thinking about the lakes and I don't know the English word. The dams.
The dams.
Is that the English word?
Dammarna.
Dammarna, exactly. So that's one kind of ethical question that was asked in that time. What are we going to do to provide this society with that kind of electricity? And that is a politician's responsibility, I think, to solve those questions. But the interesting thing in Sweden is that we are sharing so much data, our integrity, personal data already. But when it comes to the authorities and their point of view in responsibility over the data that they have collected, there you have like a interesting.
So can you give an example how we share data already? I mean, I guess all the tech companies and social networks, we share so much data there, right?
Yes.
Is that what you're thinking about, or is
that's one of the things I'm thinking about? But also when you go to to apoteket and collect your drugs and medicines, and someone asks you what are your personal number, and you said it out loud.
Yeah.
That's also a way to share your personal data. But in the digital area, of course, when you fill in formats on internet, buying stuff.
We've discussed this here, how funny it is in Sweden, where we have GDPR on the one hand side, but I can Google and go to hitta.se, or I can find...
Or alla bolag.
Alla bolag. I can find clear information, my phone number.
And even salaries and so many...
You can find things that are... sensitive by GDPR, but it's out there for me to buy.
And if you're driving,
how does that work?
Yeah, and if you're driving your car through Sweden, you can find these big billboards, signs from Ratsit. Do you want to know what your neighbors are?
So weird.
It's so weird.
Super weird.
And in the same time, we have this discussion on the integrity. But I think that's actually from offentlighetsprincipen. And that kind of training that we have in the public sector to really be careful with the data and value and information that you gather from the people. So in bättredelat, we have also one of the positions that the leaders have pointed out, that we need to talk about the shift from the authorities having the responsibility over your data to that this is your data.
Right. Taking ownership of your own data and stuff.
Exactly.
Could maybe one key question here is could you summarize maybe the way the report is laid out is with the key use cases and then positions on a certain amount of topics. Could we just briefly summarize the key positions, and then we can discuss how they were arrived and what they mean?
Yeah, I can take those 6 points that summarize the report. The first is lead by empowering. It's all about the leadership, but also making not talk about what AI can do, but do it. That's basically what the point is. And number 2 is build a solid foundation for the use of data, the infrastructure and sharing
the processes,
and data quality as stuff like that. Number 3, talk about how AI and data sharing can solve the welfare challenges. And what we mean by that is to have a focus on the challenges in society, not on the technology.
On the jobs to be done.
Jobs to be done and the value created.
And this is where we can start making politique out of things, where we actually get politicians interested and where we can get the general public interested by talking about, these are the concrete benefits that new technology can deliver to your ordinary family or your ordinary citizen. And we feel that that's not being discussed enough.
Yep.
We go all the way into details talking about information leaks of this and that.
And we have conversations, of course. We meet people who are close to the AI civilministern and the AI strategy and all that for Sweden. And one of the key hardest points is like, how do we make politics out of this compared to all the other stuff we want to discuss in Almedalen, right?
I have a lot of thoughts about that. He can call me.
But it's very simple, because it's about the jobs to be done, and then when it's the jobs to be done, then we're back in hardcore politics, prioritizing those.
Exactly. And we don't do that enough. Oh, sorry, I'm going to hand back.
But we can go back to that. I just say the other 3. So 4, put the citizens and end users first. And what we mean by that is you have to get the end users engaged in the use of data and AI. So the doctors, the teachers, the social workers, they have to be a part of the development.
But bottom line, it's defining who are you doing this for?
Exactly.
For whom doing what is the core question. The job to be done, for whom doing what?
And
And
we
if you
have-
don't get the story here, what are you solving?
And we have
concretely?
a great collaboration with Barncancerfonden in Sweden, and they are the citizens. So if you collaborate with them, they have the challenges, they have the money, they have the drive. So if you do it together with them, you can really solve some big challenges. And number 5, make sure it is scalable. So we have actually that as a point.
That's
Make
great.
sure it is scalable from the design, from the
Think
start.
big, start small, scale fast.
Exactly. And number 6, ensure interoperability across the Nordics. So here we actually point out that we need an interoperability center in Sweden. I think that's also something that the Nordic Council of Ministers just
And what do we mean
started
with that?
last
It's
week.
sharing the investment in the ideas or the best practices or how we do things, or concretely, what do we mean with
We feel that the Nordic countries, and then we're actually including the Baltics as well. We feel that we both share the same challenges and to a very large extent the same culture
and values?
and values, definitely. Yeah. Which means that we feel that we should be able to provide a unified view within the European Union, because that's where most of the legislation happens.
Exactly. So in order for us to be noise in the European Union, we can become a signal as a Nordic signal.
Very much true, yeah.
And perhaps also lead by example on responsible AI.
Yeah, but so if we really want to get stuff done, we can collect ourselves in this story, of course.
Yes.
We believe that's true, and well, the network believes that that's definitely true, yeah.
Or not maybe true, but a necessity to make ourselves heard.
And here you can also share standards. That's a common issue that comes up. But also foster like a common ground on AI ethics, as you pointed out. And here we also talk about the Nordic model, the Swedish model or the Nordic model. And that's quite strong in our countries. How do you work together with the unions, for example, to
Which is drastically different to other large industrial nations. They don't understand our union cooperation at all.
No. But do we do it in Sweden today? No.
What do you mean, do we do what?
The collaboration on AI with the union.
No.
Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it. I'm uninformed, completely uninformed.
Because
on
it's
that
not a
angle.
political issue. I think that's why.
Interesting. I haven't thought about that either.
How to make this a political issue, I think, is an interesting question. I'd really like to get back to that shortly. Because,
But
I think
let's
it's
wrap
important.
up the core topics of the report. So here we have 6 topics. Of course, we can dig into them and try to understand where we're coming from. But I kind of leave that up to you. Out of those 6, which one do you think is most interesting to dig into more and to really go behind the scenes what was discussed and how you arrived at it? Not for all 6, but for the ones that was really
Now you're
interesting.
asking us to pick our favorite child, right?
Exactly.
No, but before that, you chose 6 of these positions for some reason. Was this done in some way through these discussions, or how do you end up coming up with these kind of 6 positions?
By listening to a number of really smart people who have been thinking most of their waking hours about this for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Was it like a gross list that sort of got clustered? Or
No, it's more a matter of. I think it's been a very creative process. We've been the engineers among us have been feeding in a number of cases and then opened up a discussion on that, and then Louise usually does a great job of. Sounded slightly negative. Louise always does a great job of facilitating a discussion among these senior leaders, and one of us is sort of frantically scribbling down keywords or good phrases, and then we start sort of feeding that back and circulating it. So it's very creative.
I really pick their brains and dig deep.
But if I were to be like a devil's advocate here and try to find some kind of potential issues with the positions.
Yeah.
Sorry for
That's
doing
good.
that.
Yep.
No, but in some way, I'm allergic to platitudes sometimes. I think the first one, for example, lead by empowering is really good. And by having the real users in some way step up and do the work, that's a much easier way to get some true value and something in production. But how do you do it? What does it mean to lead by empowering?
Yeah, I think that's you just pointed out that the child that the most of the leaders wanted to have as number one, or actually that what they said was this is the top position that needs to be addressed in every one of the other ones. So you can't have data foundation if you don't lead it by empowering. You can't have scalability if you don't lead by empowering, etc., etc.
Because the way I try to avoid pluralities is like to add like a not somewhere in that. So what happens if you do not lead by empowering?
Nothing.
But what is media agreed? But still, what does it mean? It means basically that someone else is not really empowering others to do stuff, but you decide for them in some way. Is that the right way to understand it?
Yes, I can give you a picture, and this is a need build, a need picture. I don't know the English word for that, but just hear me out. So many leaders or civil servants today, they can describe a leadership that sits with a red pen. So when you come back to your boss, and it could be a director in your municipality, regions, or authority in Sweden, you have a leader who is there with their pen and like, don't do that, do this instead, and are the expert. Exactly. Yes. Because that's how we see leadership in the public sector today. You have to be an expert, you have to be the one who decides. So leading by empowering is the opposite.
So it's creating the preconditions basically for other people to come up with innovations and so on.
Exactly, because you have to make sure that your organization is can learn from mistakes, but also from success, and also to have this culture of sharing stories and sharing solutions, and then prestige.
Right.
So leading by empowering is actually building a culture that's quite different from that kind of culture that you have today. And you can, reflect on why we have that. But I think it's kind of interesting.
But I think
people are very afraid of doing wrong in Sweden.
But the tricky point is, I think this is, we are getting it. The tricky point is that when we're expressing it in a way, and then you can, as Anders said, if it's a position, it's a strategy, you could always try by putting not in front of it. It doesn't make any sense. And then if it's, no one would ever put not in front of empowerment. So it's, in this sense, it's okay, tricky one. So then what you're saying now when we're looking behind the curtain, so to speak, it's interesting to think about, how you make that more pointy, I guess, because the empowerment here is key, and they are taking it up. But it's so easy that it's something that you can. I'm empowering. I'm listening.
If I understand it correctly, it's also that people are actually not empowering people today. Perhaps especially in public sector, where they are basically. Yeah, sorry, you can say something.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that I think that we should consider this a headline, and we actually fill out quite a lot of the blank space with a bit of detail for each position. Yeah. But I think that if we're talking about empowering, for example, you can dig up so many examples of everything from, like you're talking about, culture to legislation, all the way down to how public entities are governed financially, which makes it really, really hard to try and fail, because you're really penalized financially for trying something out and failing. So there are so many concrete examples of how we are not empowering people.
Yeah,
today.
Because now we're getting somewhere. Because I think it would be hard, even living in Värmdö, going to the one who is the municipal leader of Värmdö and ask her if she is a leader, is empowering her staff. Of course she is. But what we are talking about is a systemic empowerment. We're talking about things in the system and things in how we are incentivized or not. That is actually an anti-pattern for empowerment. Yeah. But if you go to the personal, I'm doing my best in my circumstance, in my constraints, everybody would argue that they are doing their best to empower. So I think it's this, the sharpness that we want.
Exactly. And something else in that, financial is very, very, very important, because if you don't have finance and support on failure and learnings and investment, you don't have
because
that scalability.
I fully agree, this is not a platitude. This is a systemic problem in how things are run or steered or governed in policy that you want to address.
Exactly, but you also have the reskill and upskill. So that's also one of the key points in empowering. You have to upskill and reskill all your workers.
Yeah, but
And it's different if you are a teacher or if you are a civil servant working with policies. But you have to do it.
But to be concrete then, empowerment means there needs to be slack in terms of investment and time in order to reskill and upskill. So we can say that you should upskill and reskill your staff. You should teach them about AI, but you have no money, you have no time, you're understaffed, under budget, and by the way, we don't do that here.
But that is empowering.
Exactly.
As you're saying, we give you A, the knowledge or the skills. We give you B, the money and the time.
Yeah.
it's
so when
time
we get
and
to
resources.
this point, it becomes super obvious that we are not empowering the way we should.
Yeah.
But I think, but you need to go beyond the headline to get here, of course.
Fully agree.
This is true.
And let's move to the second and try to do the devil's advocate here as well.
It was fun. Because when you did it now, it was so much stronger when we came to that level.
And the second one then, to build a solid foundation. It's hard to put a knot here, but still, who would not want to have a solid foundation for the use of data? But what I think you mean here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it is really hard to have the infrastructure to work with data in a good way. But is it, I guess the question is it for a single organization to simply manage the data and do the data governance properly themselves, or is it more about the collaboration? Or what do you mean when you say you need to have a solid foundation? Because I think everyone wants to have a solid foundation here.
Exactly, and a robust use of data and reuse of data.
Yeah,
everybody wants it, but to be able to have it, you have to share. Well, I'm not a data engineer, so please help me out. But you need to have the possibility to structure your data in the same way, so they can.
So that enables collaboration.
Collaborate. Yeah.
Yes,
So
okay,
that data needs to work together, and some of our municipalities put in front that we need like an API strategy in Sweden. We'll need to have a politics on that. Every data that can be shared should be shared. Stuff like that. But that's just the politics. To do it concrete, then you need to have the standard work. And again, in electricity that we have been having for a long time, you have the standards. And we have a lot of standard works in different technical areas.
Analogy to have. If you didn't have a solid foundation for the electrical grid, for example, that we need to have working throughout the Nordics, it will be horrific. Right?
Yes, totally.
And perhaps is similar.
It's similar, and if electricity and water are a very bad combination. So if you have a ship who you want to have a battery or electricity on, and then you come to shore, then you need to standard. To make it safe, that nobody gets hurt, but also etc. etc.
So we need to have a Nordic data grid, similar to electric grid.
But that's one of the things. But the other thing in a solid foundation, it's also that it needs to be funded and have the power to be the data lake that you go to.
But this is the point, right? So to have a solid foundation is a no-brainer. To structure it and politically highlight the mandates and what is federated and what should be centrally funded versus what should be municipality funded is the core question here, in my opinion. So a solid foundation as a position paper, as a position headline, this is good, but it's quite weak if you're not making any positions on what we mean here. And researchers at Göteborgs University, they made an article about the digital paradox in Sweden, if you read it, with the four paradoxes, and I had a deep discussion with them. This is normal stuff, man. This is what we've been doing for 10, 15 years. It's not either or, by the way. It's a hybrid. So you need to, So I think if we're not getting to the real meat of the conversation, it can be so much stronger.
But I think, I worked with the health sector for like 20 years ago or something, and in Sweden it's kind of interesting. You have this kind of, at least I think 5 different data formats for just sharing the journal of patients in Sweden. And they're not, compatible with each other. So just moving from one region to another can suddenly mean that these people or this hospital cannot really read your data. I'm not sure about today, but that.
Well, it's the same today.
It is.
Yes, that's one of the cases that we have run up into many times. And actually, it's not only between regions; it can be apartment to apartment.
Really?
So that's a really
that's not a solid foundation.
No, it's not. It's a really problem. But one of the things, because I've been thinking about that, so how do you make that happen?
Yeah.
And probably by decisions, right? So humans need to gather up and decide on informatics and taxonomy and stuff like that. That you have been doing in infrastructure.
Because I worked, I did research in semantic web for like 20 years ago, and they tried to come up with a single standard for the whole of the world, and it failed completely. It is hard, and sometimes I think coming up with a single standard that everyone agrees on will be really hard. But I think actually AI can circumvent that in some ways. I think that we can have ways that may be different, but we can translate between them, and perhaps we can have ways to share data without having all exactly the same standard and format. Right?
I think that's the key point here, because we need to think about it in a different way, not to solve it in the ways that we have been doing it. But here's the hard part: when we talk to each other, we don't have that kind of metaphor for how to do it in the new way. But if you think of AI, that could be the translator.
Could be,
then you need like principles or other things. But you also have to make the decision. Of course, we in Sweden are going to make it you as a patient able to collect your data, and it should follow you. Because that's our first position paper. It was on the issue on the value chain or the health chain. What did you call it?
And actually being able to own your own data.
Yes.
That's one of the principles that we put in the first paper. Actually.
Do you think that? Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think in order to be a position paper, because ultimately I was joking about that. I want to build a solid foundation. We have all agreed upon that. But what is the architecture of a blue foundation versus a red foundation? Because there are very different ways to reach a solid foundation. Do you want to do it monolithic in one huge monolithic data lake centrally? That is.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. Or do you want to do it in modern distributed architectures with a platform and stuff like that? Mm-hmm. So and here's a fundamental: where does the power for this foundation lie, and investment and mandates, and how do we foresee that? So it's sort of not until you get there is the technical stuff becomes politics as well.
And I must say I'm slightly flattered that you're asking us to provide a detailed answer to that.
No, I was just curious on how far into the topic we got.
Right now we're at the stage where we want to raise awareness. I want to stress that the intended target audience for this paper, I would say that it's two target audiences.
This is an important comment, by the way. Which one?
One is politicians.
Yeah.
We need to phrase this in a way that makes it relevant for somebody in the political system. And the second one is high level decision makers in the public sector.
Yeah.
Both on the technical side, but to them they would probably react much like a bit of the comments that you're giving, that this is actually fairly self-evident stuff. But if you're not coming from the tech side, if you're for example the head of the social services department at a municipality, or you're head of the neonatal care at a hospital or something, I would say that we need to start by raising the awareness of that these are actually important issues for you too to think about. And that's the stage where we're at right now, I would say, with this paper. Is that a fair conclusion?
It's a position on what we'll need to look into then.
Exactly, because if we sort of took this one step further and said, we need to consider whether we should be using a distributed architecture or a monolithic one. You would get blank stares from a lot of the politicians I know, at least. And
now I took it on purpose down deep. But what I'm trying to get to is that even when you're doing it for the highest politician in Sweden, what is the choice? So when you say we need a foundation, it's not a choice.
The choice is not to do anything, which I think to some extent, if I'm being a bit mean, is what we're doing now.
And we don't have that infrastructure.
I think it moves to the second position, or third rather, position that you have.
That's a good point.
Which really says about, talk about how AI data sharing can solve some of the challenges we have today. And I think exactly what you're saying, if we don't do anything, we will not solve these challenges. And by, I think, as you said before, if we demonstrate, what the opportunity cost is by not doing it, they will start to understand we need to do something, right? And I think just describing the opportunity cost here is super valuable.
And preferably the opportunity cost not only in Swedish crowns or what have you, but also in people not getting the care that they have the right to expect.
Mm-hmm. And one of the strategies that we point out is work with civil society and media to foster a public debate. That's one way to do this. And I think that when I talk to civil society organizations, they often feel stepped aside on this kind of matters that, you could talk about human rights in using data and AI and healthcare for the many or the few, stuff like that.
And if I might be a little bit provocative here, I think that the from time to time the point of view that I would guess that the public has differs a bit from the point of view that's sort of some civil servants have. For example, if I asked any one of you around the table whether you would prefer to get the best possible pacemaker, if you hopefully not, but if you do, if you should ever need one, I would give you the selection of two of these. One of them, which stores some pretty important biometric data about you in the US, and one that doesn't store any data whatsoever. And one of them is more likely to be able to keep you from getting a fatal heart attack. And you have that choice by yourself. It's always a trade-off, right? And I think that trade-off is not being put to the general public.
I think that's a great point. And if you can make that more visual and apparent for leaders, I think you've done a great service with these kind of positions. It's a really good point, I think.
Mind you, it's not black and white. So I'm not saying that it's always right to do X or Y. I'm just saying it's a complicated issue, and for a long time we haven't been treating it like an issue at all, I would say.
Okay, so how do we talk about AI and data sharing? I mean, I think we can all agree that the need for it is great, and we need to speak about the opportunity cost and the lives that it can kill potentially if we don't do it properly. But how do you do it? I mean, one is of course to publish a paper that you have, but we need to, I guess, in some way talk about it. Or how do you do it? How do you reach out and talk about these issues?
Well, that's $1 million question, because we have been doing this for 3 years, and it's hard. It's hard to reach out with the stories, but I think it's storytelling that you need to do, and you need to address it in a way that you can so you can follow the argument, so to speak. And I think that if you make civil servants aware of what you can do with the AI and make them use AI in their everyday work life, and they also start to get those kind of own stories, then perhaps they can make the movement.
It's empowering the leaders.
It's empowering
right?
the people, or empowering the leaders, and not see it as something that a politician needs to do. Sometimes in Sweden we talk about that we don't have enough political leadership in this kind of question, but you can also say we don't have enough.
But I think it's. We mentioned this before. How can we make data and AI a political issue? Because it's not today, and I think it's really rather hard for a politician to even speak about this, because it doesn't really help them in any kind of election.
Yeah.
But perhaps if you do speak about the opportunity cost, about the potential issues, if you don't do this properly, that could become a political issue.
That's exactly this is exactly the line of reasoning that we've been having now for the past years. I won't say that it's worked perfectly, but I think that it's been a It's been a relevant way of addressing the issue. One of several relevant ways, but I really do think that in order to make this a political issue, which it needs to be, we need to move away from saying we can save X billion by moving into I don't know, hyperscaler architecture, or by consolidating Swedish data. So if we're instead talking about we had one of the most memorable moments we had in the first paper was when one of our members stood up on stage and said that she'd been part of trying out using machine learning to identify women and children most at risk from being killed by their husbands and dads, and that project was cancelled due to privacy legislation issues, which may very well have been valid, but still. She stood up and said, well, if you could point out to me where it says that we're going to be placing integrity issues above the Child Convention, then I'm happy to accept what just happened.
That's a good point.
So I think that, that to me is policy making stuff right there, because it affects me as a father and probably pretty much everybody else. And if we can continue having those sorts of discussions, it doesn't have to be about legislation or integrity. It can be about anything. Why aren't we spending more money on building this data foundation, for example? We need to explain why, what it does to you in your everyday life.
And also to share the stories where data and AI are being used to prevent perhaps children who's in school not learning. And we have seen also that, this late discussion on skärm till perm, if you use your phone or not in school, and also a fear from politicians that the school systems and the children are not learning enough, and it's all the computer's fault, basically. But we also need in that area to talk about all those kids who are helped with digital tools, and all those children who in first time have like a hope for future. So that kind of discussion needs to be addressed as well. So where can you use data and devices to help? And I think that kind of stories need to be told. And one of the things that I've been dreaming about is, television should do a documentary. Thank you, on moms and dads who has children in school who has been helped from technology and data.
Right.
And listen to them and their stories, because it's going to move you in the gut. Home-sitting children who can be a part of education because you can use your computer and video.
It's interesting how these kind of
I think that
opinions, it's a strong opinion that any kind of digitalization is dangerous in some way, and using the phone or the computer is bad for people, but it is a two-sided coin in some way.
Exactly. Yeah. Of course, I don't think that children should have telephones. That's my point of view. Okay. I think they should have like a phone that you can call on, nothing more. That's my point of view. I have 4 children, and they all have phones. I would just say that. So I'm no better, but I think that could be a valid point. But I'm very angry on the discussion in the school system that we think that digital tools are not helping.
But what are the low-hanging fruits out of the different political debates we could try to tie into? I mean, to do storytelling and to move it into a political issue, yes. So we are strategizing on this, and then what are the low-hanging fruits? Where school maybe, learning, health. Where would you summarize, or where would the group summarize the low-hanging fruits for making this a political debate?
I would say that there are already several examples of political decisions being made. For example, within the judicial system on how to share data to fight organized crime or terrorism.
Yeah, here we found traction to do something. You do a lot.
Yeah, and you could have a lot of opinions on why it's always very easy to restrict people's freedom when it comes to terrorism rather than other things. But let's not go down that route really. But
that was one low hanging fruit.
That is definitely one low hanging fruit. I would hesitate to call sharing of health data low hanging fruit as a whole, but there are definitely discrete areas in there.
It's a politically strong story. Let's not use the word low hanging fruit, but the politically most viable path. What to
saving life is always
saving life.
Yes,
yeah.
And
school
as well. But that's
a tricky one.
It's a tricky one. But politicians like that. They like if you have like a conflict. So the school system should be.
Media likes conflict, and media means conflict, means politics, means something that people listen to.
Yeah, and the politics,
you need to figure out, where will the media want to put some fuel on the fire.
But I would if media should also look into that alternative costs, that would be really interesting.
This whole debate, people are, what's his name, who is sort of uncovering the costs of procurement and our inefficiencies.
Jens Nylander, yeah.
Jens Nylander, I think, is doing a very, very good digital political statement right now, and this is seen right now.
Yep, and it's slightly uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Let's go with that one.
Good. Yeah, that's
climate change.
Climate change.
That could be one, and also.
But before we leave that one, I think this is one of those sort of politically. This is one avenue where it's like it starts to get uncomfortable. Or does that mean it's shut down? That it's shutting down? Or is it something that opens up? I
definitely hope not. I mean, Jens is doing a great job in what I've been and a number of my colleagues have been involved in for a number of years. That is fighting organized crime, because quite a lot of the fraud is actually organized crime. So I certainly hope that it's not being shut down. On the other hand, without sort of taking anything away from that initiative, which I think is great, it is also slightly on the boring side of how you can use you can use analytics. It's much more and as I said, fighting crime or terrorism isn't boring, but it's also a very obvious route that we tend to go down a lot. And
a masculine as well.
Elderly care, for example. Why is that? Why is the care system tied so badly into the healthcare system with the different actors there? And why are we struggling so much with sharing data? Why are we making right now judgments on personal integrity versus risk mitigation for elderly people, for example? Is it okay to put cameras in people's homes to monitor whether they have fallen and broken a femur? Is that something that you would accept as a private citizen, that we could monitor you?
But I have an angle on what we're talking about now.
But we need to.
Yeah,
really? We're just getting going.
But isn't it? Sometimes it feels like there is a discussion ongoing, but they are missing the ammunition. We need to give them some ammunition to the media, some ammunition to the politicians.
Let's put some fuel on the fire.
So it's a little bit like if we can find where they want to debate and then feed the data points into here, the connecting the dots with those debates.
That would be great.
Fully agree. That's what we've been trying to do to some extent. Yeah.
I think my time management policing skills is getting frustrated here, but I think it would be awesome if we just move through the 6 positions, and then we have some ending questions as well. But if we take number 4, put citizens and end users first, and then let's try the devil's advocate kind of position and platitude position here as well. What happens if we don't put citizens and end users first? Who do you put first then?
The legislation, the regulation, the internal cost efficiency of the public actors. That's an easy one.
I think that's the one I see how you really start from a particular perspective. Yeah. We're not going to start from the cost perspective. We're not going to start from the legislature. We're going to start from the citizen.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So here it is a choice.
That
I think it's clear. For me, that's clear.
And also, really as you pointed out, when we started talking about the AI strategy, perhaps that's the wrong way to start.
Exactly.
Right. So, okay, and I'm trying to keep the time here a bit short, but if we were to try to summarize a bit, what's the problem with putting citizen and end users first? Is it that people are focusing too much on the cost and too afraid about legislation, or what is really the challenge here?
Well, in some ways it's the way of working. When you talk about involving citizens, you tend to think about it as a hearing. You know,
okay.
And that's not really the point. The point is to use design thinking or design solutions. And if you do that, use that kind of method, then you decide, make a design that's usable and make the end users in the front seat. So you can test and then correct and then test again to make sure that your idea are being good and a good idea. But sometimes in the public system we are in the procurement and we tend to set up an idea that we really already know what we want. And also those who build the solutions, they also want the public sector to tell them what they are going to build. And in none of that discussion, the end users are there. So you also need to have a procurement strategy that put the end users first, and also to have learnability in those processes.
Perhaps you can bring some of the private company mentality. I remember the Spotify days. The top one metric that you want to optimize is really the end user experience.
Exactly.
And then if it costs a bit more, but that doesn't matter, because if you in the end, in the long term, really improve the user experience, that's worth more than anything else. And perhaps the similar kind of mentality should be placed here.
That would be great.
And as long as you get a wide enough definition of what the end user experience is, because you can build a great web page for reporting X, Y, or Z with all sorts of user experience aspects taken into account. Or you can realize that we don't actually have to ask the citizen at all. We can find this information elsewhere, and that might be the best user experience of all.
And I guess I think we've spoken about these in other positions as well. But I think what you're trying to say, that really putting what will the opportunity cost of lives be instead of crowns or dollars. And by using that kind of metrics, then we are putting citizen and users first, right?
Yeah, and also to create that service that enables citizens to make their own choice.
Right.
That could also be a way forward that's very concrete.
Awesome. Should we move to the next?
Yeah.
Just two left, but make sure it's scalable. Then I think we've spoken about this quite a lot as well, so perhaps we don't need to spend too much time on it, but okay, what happens if you don't make it scalable? What's the problem of not making it scalable? Why not simply build a prototype first?
Well, prototype are good. I think also pilots are good. I think this discussion that's out there that we're going to kill every pilot, I'm not sure I totally agree on that, because it's a method along others. I think projects also has its place. but the thing is that you need to think scalability first and in the beginning, because if you don't, you tend to just work in your own department and make something for the end users that you are working with, and I think that's also a culture thing. And if you follow the money in the public sector, that's how we are designed. Right. So it's really hard to be scalable. So you need an organization that allows you to scale and to also to answer the question, if you put a lot of money and effort in one kind of digital service, are the other one is going to pay for that later? That's also a question that's arising. And also, if you have a municipality that could have a digital service that could be used for another one, right, how are you going to share the costs, and which are the taxpayers who's going to pay for it? So scalability is also on how to organize digital.
And I would say that might be in Sweden at least, one of the most important aspects that we are by design an extremely silo-oriented public governance system, and finding ways around that is sorely needed.
To be honest, when I read the 6 positions, I'm thinking also, this is good, no regrets positions, but they are not really uncovering the real problems enough. Like you are describing now, which is fundamentally a position on how we should share what the state should be doing versus, different departments versus the municipalities and all that. So this is what I was looking for. Like on the high level, these are 6 key areas. Agreed, tick in the box. I would love to see what's a position paper. I would love to see positions on those no regrets topics.
Well, we are going to continue working in this Nordic network, so be careful what you wish for.
So it was a rhetorical leading question. Are you going down into positions on these positions, so to speak?
Well, in the paper you have like key points under each of those positions that kind of go deeper.
They're too soft.
Yeah, they are too soft.
You can interpret them left or right, monolith or
I can agree on that.
I can interpret that the way I wanted it to, as a central approach or a distributed approach, red or blue.
True.
You sound exactly like I do most of the time when I'm in my client engagement. So I can't help but agree. Yeah, obviously we would love to keep digging here, but as you say, we need to start somewhere. Right?
But you needed to get them together as a group.
Yeah.
So then you need to have a solid foundation, and you need to lock the door on that one. Mm-hmm. We need to have the first closure. Now we can't go back from here at least. Now we can negotiate.
Fully agree.
Is that the idea?
And
that's one of the ideas. Yes.
Yeah, we had some discussions on the trials. And we were that's one of the things that we were discussing where we could go. We had a choice to go harder on that one,
or clearer, not harder.
Or clearer.
To me, it's clear on position.
Yeah, perhaps. But the thing here is that we are pointing out an area, or all of those areas could need to dig deeper in, and that one on medical trials and the method around it. That's one of the things that if you're going to make something scalable in healthcare, you need also to think about the scientific method that you are using. And we are designing the medical trials.
Yeah, but you have already relaxed me, because now I see a great salesman in front of me that is doing partial close. Do you see what I mean? Like sometimes we need to lock it down what we're going to talk about, and now when we lock that down, and let's stick here, and now we can move into the harder question, because if you open up everything on everything, you're not going to get anything done. So I agree with it. As an approach. I'm not happy with it yet, how far it needs to go, of course. No one is.
The other alternative would have been to wait a year with this one and deliver some more details. And I think we'll get there. I think we or somebody else will get there. It doesn't really matter who, but as long as somebody gets there, it's going to be fine.
Awesome. And the final position, ensure interoperability across the Nordics. And it's hard to say, why shouldn't you do that? Because I think we all agree that's a very easy one that we need to have. And it's certainly not the case today, right?
I think the operative phrase here is in the Nordics. Because you could easily have said ensure interoperability across Europe or across Sweden, yes. But across Sweden is also relevant, I would say. But rather than going what we're saying is that the Nordics have a number of common denominators that makes it interesting to work with interoperability within that region.
Didn't you also in the report have some kind of number on saying if we actually combine all the countries in the Nordics, we come up to a rather big player in the world, right?
Yes, if you count citizens.
Right, okay, that's the number, okay.
Or BNP. Even, I think.
And also this one, Nordic interoperability. This one I also think is a fairly clear position in some ways, because it highlights that it's not just as simple as working in Sweden, and it's not just as simple as following European legislation. It means something that we want to create a critical mass around positions to be a political force in the European the negotiation, so to speak. So I think that this one is and is an effort that is not the same as you would do it locally in each country.
Yeah.
So I think it's that one I can sort of choose up straight away.
And you're talking from a political context. You could also apply it to a technical context.
Yes.
But by standardizing across all these countries, we actually become a significant enough client or possible customer to a number of different vendors that we can actually get more into. There's a larger chance that we can get some adaptations and.
I was thinking technically almost first, and then standards, and then.
I was almost expecting that. Yeah.
And I was doing that, and I was also doing the values on the positions
Yeah.
of how we think about different legislative laws coming up.
Yeah.
And here you also have the Nordic ethic point of view and AI, trustworthy AI. You can make a statement in that area.
And there's so much going on with the AI Act, so it can also be a way to become clear in that whole debate to form an opinion that is more than one at a time.
The most important thing on the AI Act, well, that's nothing that we need to, adopt to it, just do it, perhaps. So in order to, put effort in doing rather than talking. So here we have like one of the key issues that I think a Nordic Interoperability Center could change. The scenery is not like how do we interpret.
Should we really have 5 different interpretations
No,
on
I
how to
don't
set
think
up
so.
a center for, I want to support small business with, complying to the AI Act, and we're going to have 4 or 5 of them.
I don't think
that
we
would not
need
make sense.
No, and we don't need more like pre-studies or think tanks on that. We need to show it.
Start doing it.
Yeah,
Start doing it together.
Together, and just putting it in front of us. Last week, I was invited to this Nordic Council of Ministers. They had like a think tank kind of meeting, and AI Sweden was there, as you know. The Martin Svensson and Mikael were represented, and they actually put that to the audience that they are going to start that kind of center or something
Nordic
like that.
AI Center,
Yeah.
right?
And I think that's was very well received, and we were discussing what are this kind of centers' responsibility in the Nordics. And then we use this position paper that we have.
Perfect.
Because I was invited because we had put this report together, and I sent it to them, and they were so happy about it because, of course, the Nordic Council of Ministers, they also have that question. So what are we going to do? AI is important, but what are the key issues?
I hope it's going to be like not just we're going to build a Nordic language model. I mean that
would be wrong.
It was.
Yeah.
It would, right? So I hope all the kind of positions and challenges that you mentioned in the paper, if we can get some progress on that and really start to collaborate on how to find value, I think that would be amazing. So great, but awesome. So you will continue to, I guess this is the question then, what's the next step for after this paper? How will you try to continue the work and find value from it?
I think it's going to be or I know that it's going to be a 2-pronged approach, maybe a 3-pronged approach, depending on how you see it. We're going to keep on working with the Swedish network, what that is, and we're going to be the area we want to probe there is lifelong learning and skilling, likely. Don't take this as gospel. We still need to finalize the decisions here, but that is likely the area we want to do next in Sweden. And then we want to do the Nordic, keep growing the Nordic network, and there we're actually going to start looking a little bit at tangible, measurable benefits. How can we get better at measuring, and how can we get better at actually steering towards these goals? And then Louise, we have your area as well around leadership, right?
Yeah, and we would also like to address the leadership issues, empowering by leadership, leading by empowering, and we are also talking about like a big meeting or something like that with everything that we have been doing. So perhaps
if you
next
can
year.
help also, finding some common understanding of the AI Act and other legislations going forward, and how to really interpret that, and find the sandboxes and whatnot to really empower businesses.
It would be really great if we could find a common Nordic point of view on that, regarding doing the whole GDPR thing all over again.
Learning the lessons from GDPR and doing it right this time.
Yeah.
It would be amazing.
And we are going to continue to put the leaders in the front seat, telling their stories and make area forum and debates for them.
And so are you meaning in relation to this position paper? The position paper has 6 key areas. Are we talking about those 6 positions, and what is the next step to move on those 6 positions into metrics, into goals, into choices, or is that part of what we discussed now, or are we moving into other projects?
To some extent, yes, we will keep digging into these 6 positions. I mean, this is where we're. That's our starting point, as you said. That we established that. I'm not sure we're going to be digging into all 6 of them at the same time.
No. So which one was the favorite out of the 6 to dig into?
Scalability.
I'm not there yet, I must admit.
Because you talked about talent, which was another one.
Skilling, yes.
How was skilling part of which position was closest to skilling?
Oh, now we're digging into specifics here. That is actually part of the Swedish network, which is.
So skilling was not part of the 6 positions.
Yeah, it was.
It's part of empowering. Yes,
okay,
it's part of empowering. Yeah.
So skilling then, if we go into a concrete topic of skilling, it's under the umbrella of empowering, I would argue. If I look at the position paper.
Fully agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm thinking we should try to keep it less than 2 hours.
Yes, we should.
I'm really sorry for pushing the time here a lot, but
it's okay.
We have to train,
It's only been 4 years, right? So.
Is this a new thing?
We've been trying for years.
5 minutes.
Oh, that's great.
Should we do the normal kind of philosophy kind of thing in the end, or what do you think, Henrik?
I would like to go a little bit more AI divide. Go philosophical. So let's have two more topics then.
Okay.
So and on the fundamental.
Okay. You want to start?
Yeah. So. We have had an ongoing discussion around how we can define the divide on AI from the tech giants, the leading countries into our country, and then you can go into. I think you can go in the micro level and look at the AI divide within organizations and competences on different roles, and then you have another, other end of the scale of AI divide, which would be. The rest of the world that is not US, not Europe, but if you take Africa or any other. So there are some fundamental topics here about inequalities around the corner here, or distribution of power or distribution of wealth. And have you thought about sort of the philosophical macro perspective or geopolitical perspective?
Personally, yes. As part of bättredelat, maybe not so much.
No, but so this is now in the philosophical end. What is our understanding of the AI divide?
For me, at least, the main geopolitical and socioeconomic divide is going to be the aggregation of capital, and the if we're not really careful here, the disempowerment of the middle class. Where you're actually industrializing quite a lot of what's made the middle class and the democracy, the representational democracy, so successful in the past 100 years. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think that is a very real risk.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, I mean, if you look at the statistics in US right now, I mean, the distribution of wealth has gone the wrong way the last 20 years.
And I'm not sure exactly the last 20 years. I'm not sure that we can blame AI for that, but I think that it might be an additional force in that direction.
Not the AI, but the tech bubble or the tech and innovation and stuff like that. But it's interesting what happens if you truly have the conversation of the haves and have-nots in AI. What will that do to that distribution? Probably polarize it further. That's my simple
But you can also say, speaking about the moat between the tech giants and the rest of the world and the companies, and some people are arguing that it's increasing, or some are saying it's decreasing. But if we look at the last year in terms of investment in infrastructure, it's a very, very clear trend. We have a few, 4 or 5 companies that are investing tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars in just infrastructure to be able to build and to serve these kind of models. Yeah. That is going to be a very few set of companies that's going to do that, a few number of them. And no Swedish one is going to do it. I would say no European one is going to be able to compete with these companies. And if they succeed, if they are going to have an AI that is empowering that company that much, they will grow in wealth potentially. It could be the case that will cause an even bigger divide, saying the few super rich companies going to grow even richer.
Yeah, so what does that mean? What does that mean from a geopolitical standpoint, going in that direction?
It all depends on how many beers we're into this discussion, I think.
Well, of course, that would be very hard for many countries if that's going to happen. If that happens, probably that also you need some raise that question politician.
Yeah, and if you take this conversation out to the extreme and you go to Africa, where they sort of kept up thanks to open source and Linux. If you imagine, we're all paying for our chatbots or LLMs, and they have no purchasing power at all. There's going to be two worlds. It ends up in two extremes if we're not careful. It's the dystopian.
Yeah, view. Remember this as well. There are people working in those companies, and they also have values. So perhaps you should be more interested in what kind of values are those companies driven by. How do they foster their company culture, and how do they see themselves as a global
so player, far, I think they have shown their true faces quite often in a fairly greedy approach, to be honest.
And then, because that's my point as well, then you need to think about what kind of society and global relationship do we want. So do we need to do some politicians on that? So do we need to have a discussion on human rights issues on data, or do we need to have some discussion on how to is it okay to use data and technology in that way that they are doing, so they can build that kind of wealth? Are there other legislations that can be addressed? I don't know, but how do you foster
I think
a culture?
It's tricky to point fingers to people who are running like hell and doing well and investing, and when you instead of pointing fingers at people who are not doing anything in this case, So I think it shines a light on if you're not acting, if you're fat and happy, and if you not see the world going by, it's to sit and scream from the back seat. Is kind of not so cool.
No, I think you should be getting involved instead. I think that politicians and the tech giants need to talk about it. Yeah. You have to address the issues, and you also have to talk about values.
Yeah, but just now to make this AI divide a little bit more balanced. At the same time, we have ICA, who's literally pushing technology into farmers that can't afford it, and they're forcing them into the cold chain in a certain way that I think is very unethical. So we are not doing anything better from the position we are for the ones who is worse off.
But I would like to challenge fundamentally what you just said about Africa getting handed the short end of the stick here, because I mean for the past decades, I would argue that you have seen the poorest countries benefiting quite a lot from digitalization. I mean, I spent a number of times in southern and eastern Africa and around the .com boom, and I mean, the classic example obviously is the mobile payment systems in Kenya and Tanzania that really empowered what was then herders.
But that was open source. That was open source that built that. That was Linux. Yeah, it was. We had Eric Hugo on. We had the guys who built that stuff here.
Moving from the the more wired kind of networking to just moving to mobile directly, actually leapfrogging them into a future that others didn't have to pass. So, I mean, there are examples of this where they actually can move faster in some ways.
That my whole point was not. My whole point was to sort of where's the debate here on the AI divide, and how do we see it end to end? And we are staring on the tech giant and what they are doing and what they should not be doing, and then we are thinking about the countries, what they're doing, what they're not be doing. And then it's like, oh, well, there's another part of the world who is still on 3G or 2G. So
and that should be addressed.
So
also,
it's an interesting topic to have part of the debate. It was the angle.
Anyway,
that was good one. Thank you.
Let's move into an even more philosophical question here, and no right answers, but just speculation. And let's see where you go with this. So imagine, hypothetically, that we have a future of AGI that could be coming next year, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, or never. Who knows? But it could be a time where we have an AI system and machines that are in general more intelligent than us in any kind of task. It could be leading to a more utopian future where we actually have more or less a world of abundance where goods and services are provided for us and we don't need really to work to the same extent as we do today. It's actually Nick Bostrom came up with a book recently called The Deep Utopia that he speaks about a potential future living in this utopia. Or it could be a more dystopian one, and then it's all the media hype about living in the Matrix and the Terminators of the world, and the machines are going to crush us and kill us all. What's your thinking there? What will happen if we will build these kind of AI systems that are potentially significantly more intelligent, moving into a super intelligent world? Peter, do you want to start?
What's the question? What's going to happen when
we will move more into a dystopian future? Where we have potentially a human extinction kind of situation where machines will kill us all, or will it be more of a utopian future where we will live even?
So look at it as a spectrum from positivist to dystopian, and why?
With my Baltic genes, my genetics from Estonia. Obviously, I'm leaning towards the dystopian side of things here. But then again, my whole life experience has been that there is always two sides to the coin, right? I would think that one of the things that we're not really discussing all that much yet is going to be the effects on the philosophy of humans, by realizing that no matter how good I get at chess, I'm never going to be able to beat the machine. I guess we had a number of existential crises with grandmasters in chess back in the 90s.
But they play more chess now than they did ever before.
And that is interesting. Are we going to become a planet full of pets and hobbyists doing stuff the hard way because it's fun? Where do we find our meaning when we know that there's always going to be somebody who's not human that does it better? I think that is actually one of the most terrifying thoughts, or at least one of those thought-provoking things to think about.
Some examples,
human build.
The Deep Utopia is saying, already today we have people that don't have to work, that still are not perhaps as intelligent or powerful as a lot of people. It can be children, for example. It can be retired people. It can be people actually that have parents that are super wealthy and they don't have to do anything. Yeah. So we have examples of people that do not have that kind of, work for a meaning in life kind of situation, and they still seems rather happy, right? Or do you think we need to work to be happy some way?
I think we do. I mean, sorry, please answer. What do you think?
Yes, we need to work. I think we need to do things for. All research points towards the fact that we need to do things for other people in order to be fulfilled. Do we need to do it 9 to 5 or get paid for it? Yeah. Probably not. But we need to do things for other people.
I think to have purpose and go for achieving goals and all that, and then you can tie that to we can do voluntary work. We can do anyone. I'm a volunteer here and here. Of course, it's work. It's not per se paid in this sense, but it's work. So, I think there is a definition of work here that might not be as tied to the monetary.
And to be a bit rude, I think that the definition you implicitly gave of work is about what 200 years old. That somebody else is paying you to do stuff for him or her.
Yeah.
That's just a couple of 100 years old. That definition of work. Back in the 17th, 18th century, most people didn't work for somebody else. They worked for themselves by farming.
Yes.
So I mean,
you worked for a living, so to speak. You worked because you had to survive in some way.
Yeah. And but I mean, these things that we take for granted now, like we were talking about, what's going to happen to nation states, for example, in a while. Well, they haven't been around for all that long. So very likely our concept of work is going to change too. It's changed a number of times before in the history of man.
But perhaps we will have to do stuff to survive, but not work in that sense that we have right now. So, but the interesting part is that humans always create. We are curious and we like to solve problems and we like to be social and and in history of humans we have also seen this kind of discussion on dystopia and utopia. So that's always when we talk about the future, are we going to go in that way or in that way? We don't know.
It's not a new concept.
No, it's not.
It's heaven or hell. Right?
It's heaven or hell. Even that are invented. It's not. It's a question that wasn't on the table.
What do you think then?
Well, we work very well together, and one part of that is that I'm a positive person.
You complement each other.
I do the risks. She does the opportunities. Yeah,
that's how we roll. No, I think on that note that humans are curious. I think we are going to create a new normal. So if there are instruments and machines that are more intelligent in some ways than us, we're going to work with that. I think.
Going to adapt to that in some way, right?
I think so. Yeah. But the interesting part here is because there are some values or ways that we humans, like democracy, bringing us together, deciding stuff, having like rules that we are sharing or values that we are discussing. Are we going to stop doing that? Then we are going into dystopia. So I think that's the key issue.
Yeah. Will the value?
So ruling the world, you would say.
But these discussions on philosophy value, will they become less important or more important in the further up towards AGI we get?
Hopefully more, but I think philosophy is always more interesting in times where everything is kind of shaky. So we have been in a time area for like 100 years where we didn't have to talk about philosophy and moral stuff, but now there are
more than ever. So the conversation of this, and this everything is accelerating and all these different choices we get. Someone said jokingly, but also, if we have a chief AI officer, we need a chief philosophy officer.
Exactly.
to balance the dimensions here.
A chief values officer, perhaps.
Yeah, and perhaps empathy. That's a really core human thing. I think that's going to be.
Do I understand you correctly? You're more on the utopian side.
Of course I am.
Of course you are. Yes, cool. Well, I am as well. I'm a positive person, I think, as well. What about you, Henrik?
I tried to formulate this before, and I think we will have AGI, and I think it's up to us and the choices we make along the way. Either way we'll end up. I don't think it has anything to do with the techniques. It has all to do with how we want to shape it. Looking at how we are at shaping it right now, I'm right now not on the positive. Last time I said I'm 50-50. I'm somewhere in the middle if this is good or bad, if it's going to be better or worse. I think we will muddle through. I think we will not really feel it. like evolution, but right now I think we're not managing the shaping so well. So that sort of means that I'm a little bit negative.
Well, I'm certainly more afraid about humans abusing AI than AI abusing humans. So that's
I agree with this.
Yes.
I agree with this point.
That's a good point.
Awesome. I think with that note, we should actually try. We still failed. We still did 2 hours.
We didn't go past 2 hours.
Yeah, we did. Thank you so very much, Louise Callenberg and Peter Daniels, for this awesome discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So great. Thank you for having us.